najprej bo gospa.
Spoštovani, en lep dober dan, dobrodošli na Fakulteti za državne in evropske študije. Moje ime je Matej Avbal, sem dekan te fakultete in v nadaljevanju bom v znak prikladnosti ta dogodek izpeljal v angleškem jeziku. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Macedonia, dear guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, and students of the Graduate School of Government and European Studies, sincerely welcome at our faculty. It's a great honor, on my own behalf and on behalf of the Graduate School of Government, to have you all here, and especially His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Macedonia. As our country, Slovenia, is a young country, so the Graduate School of European Studies is a young school too. And of course, also the Republic of Macedonia, our friendly international relations, is a young country too. And I couldn't think of a better setting than here that the minister would be giving his speech today. But before he will be allowed to take the floor and before he will outline his talk on the bumpy road of the Republic of Macedonia to the European Union, let me give the floor to Mr. Milan Orožen Adamić, who heads a special section of the Institutot Јоже Pучnik, which deals with the foreign relations. So, Mr. Adamić, the floor is yours.
Thank you for your invitation, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, on behalf of the Forum for European and International Affairs of the Јоже Pучnik Institute, to bid a very warm welcome to His Excellency, Mr. Nikola Popposki, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Macedonia. And to thank him cordially for having taken some of his precious time and give us a lecture after an intensive working day he had with the highest representatives of the Republic of Slovenia. Macedonia is a traditional friend with which the Republic of Slovenia shares common views on the most important international economic and cultural ties. And last but not least, by importance thus that we have common languages. Personally, I feel confident that a very close cooperation and further improvement of existing excellent relations will be very warmly welcome. Mr. Minister, your country has been living in quite some time now in a very complex international relation and in a fragile relation with some of the neighboring countries. We would be really very grateful if you could tackle us these sensitive issues, well as the accession process of Macedonia to the Euro-Atlantic community. Thank you, and please, Your Excellency, Mr. Popposki, floor is yours.
Since we are in an academic setting, let me be allowed to present also the Mr. Minister, also from his academic point of view. Minister holds a degree from the College of Europe in Bruges, and he's held a couple of important positions before becoming a minister. He was at the mission of the Republic of Macedonia to the European Union, was ambassador, head of the mission. He worked at the European Commission and has held a couple of other positions before. The minister was so generous that he intends to not just give the talk, but he will also open the floor for your questions. Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Minister, the floor is really yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to have this opportunity to address you. I guess that on a Friday afternoon with such a sunny weather, the hot topic should have been tourism opportunities in Slovenia. I really feel sorry that I didn't have an opportunity to explore that bit of a very relevant and very interesting topic. As a matter of fact, we have only discussed it briefly at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, while we have concluded that we have an excellent set of bilateral relations. We have also concluded that there are many opportunities that are laying ahead of us, and rural tourism is one area where Slovenia has excelled in the past years and where Macedonia has a lot of lessons to learn. I hope that we will be able to implement also the bit of an excellent hospitality that I've been granted today. On the side of the real topic of the lecture on this Friday afternoon, as I said, I will have to underline several aspects that are quite important from a Macedonian perspective, but I believe also from a wider regional perspective. As Slovenia is also part of a wider Southeast European region and has very strong links with the countries that are today part of both the European Union and NATO, but are also candidates. They're also candidates to join both clubs. I think that the most often used metaphor for the integration process on both of these paths, and especially in the one to the European Union, is the one of riding a bicycle. That you basically need to pedal permanently, that you need to invest a lot of energy, and while doing that you will advance. As a matter of physics, if you stop pedaling, you have certainly tried this experience on the bike, you risk of falling. And this is an objective risk when for an extended period of time you're prevented from pedaling. It has been a little bit the case of Macedonia, unfortunately, a candidate country to join the European Union since 2005, and since 2009 having constantly received a positive recommendation from the European Commission as of the need to start the accession talks. It has been a frustrating exercise, but I believe that we should take a broader picture of the integration process. And this broader picture will indicate that, as we tend to say, that each one believes that his own mountain is the heaviest. And that every country that has been part of different consecutive waves in the enlargement path has its own mountain and had the perception that this was the heaviest and the most difficult compared to the others. We can discuss different perspectives and measuring instruments to see who had the more difficult task. But one thing is certain, that we need to make sure that the credibility of the integration process is kept. We need to make sure that we don't lose out of sight the essential idea of this integration project. The European Union, as I think you will all agree, is above all a peace project. It is a project that has emerged after the most disastrous conflict that we have seen in our continent. And it was brought by the idea that through economic integration and bringing people, businesses, economies, connections across the borders together, we will make sure that this continent benefits from peace, prosperity, and security on the long run. We should not neglect the fact that it has been the most successful experience in these terms, as all the countries that are part of the European project today have benefited for over 60 years of peace and prosperity. That is a matter of fact. I believe that this needs to be underlined, especially in times of crisis, because most of us tend to be defocused by the fact that we do face serious challenges. We do have to make budgetary cuts, whether it is in Macedonia, in Slovenia, France, Germany, or elsewhere. We need to make tough decisions. But these tough decisions are made with the one purpose: to secure a better future, more prosperous future. I think that we have to not forget also that most of the reforms that the European integration process is bringing into the countries that are part of this integration process, Slovenia has experienced that over a decade ago. We are still experiencing for a longer period of time, are needed also for the country itself. We tend to forget sometimes that all the reforms that we need to do are for the sake of the citizens of the country, for the sake of the taxpayers, and a little bit less for ticking boxes on Excel sheets in order for bureaucracy to check whether we have fulfilled certain criteria. And I think that it shouldn't be forgotten, especially when we need to make very serious reforms and very serious efforts. The fact that we have experienced this longer period of waiting, basically being in a waiting room without being able to step in, has made us be more mature as a democracy, as a country, and using the words of a former British Prime Minister, if it doesn't kill you, only makes you stronger. And I think that this has been the case with Macedonia in the past years. We have fulfilled an extensive list of criteria in order to start the accession talks, but we haven't been able to start. What we need to make sure for the coming period is that we do not lose the enthusiasm, and we help our friends within the European Union to keep insisting on the credibility of this process. If we go backwards, back in the 70s, the first enlargement wave when UK, Ireland and Denmark have joined the European communities at that time, this has been a time of serious crisis. It was just years after the first petrol shock, a severe turbulence that has damaged practically all the economies on our continent. And it was the moment when the first enlargement wave has happened. So perhaps from that perspective, we should not lose out of sight that sometimes crisis means opportunities. It means opportunities, but it means also commitment. What we have done in times of crisis, as I have said, is that we've tried to be inventive. We cannot neglect the fact that besides the assessment that has been made by the European Commission of fulfilling all the criteria to start accession negotiations already years ago, this decision needs confirmation of the Council. An average citizen in practically any country of the European Union, including the candidate countries, will have difficulties to understand how does it function. It is actually a black box. But still, you need an agreement from all the member states. And in our case, there has been one member state that has been blocking this decision, and we have to make sure that our bicycle advances. So we have come up with this idea of having high-level accession dialogue. While the abbreviation is HLAD, and in many languages from the region, it means a shade. I don't know whether this is the case with Slovenian, but so we have different interpretations. but yes, but the essence of it is that we wanted to make sure that we have certain benchmarks that will enable us to keep pedaling. Actually keep pedaling without having pedals and uphill. Pretty much against the laws of physics, you would say. I would agree. But as I said, we don't have much of a choice, and we have to make our own path, knowing that the mountain that we are bearing on the back is quite heavy. Now we need to fight on both sides. One is the one toward the European Union. We want to join a union in which we will have a contribution. I think that by now, and especially in the last 2 years, nobody, literally nobody, has an illusion that membership in the European Union solves your issues. Quite the opposite. You need to make sure that you contribute in the larger family in order to solve issues also of other countries. So the solidarity principle is a double-folded. Much of the time, we insist on the fact that we want the members of our club to be solidary with our case, but we shouldn't forget that sometimes we are asked to contribute in a common pot. It can be for good or bad reasons, but I guess that everybody has his own judgment on that. I believe that the only judgment on the basis of which we can make an assessment on whether it's for good or bad purposes is whether it contributes or it doesn't contribute to the common and principal objective, the peace project I was talking about at the very beginning. It should not be forgotten. Within this HLAD, we have defined 5 hot topics, actually the most difficult areas that each one of the countries needs to make sure that is reflected in its own legislation, but also in its own spirit. And that is the most difficult part. Changing mentalities requires quite a lot of energy. I think that everybody who has done this exercise has realized it takes years and it takes efforts during these years. We have in discussion together with our partners in the European Commission, also the Member States, come up with the conclusion that judiciary, basically the entire set of rule of law, is something that requires a lot of efforts, and during a very long period of time. It is one of the topics on which we have discussed, and it is one of the topics on which we have determined precise objectives and goals which we would like to achieve. We have also other areas that are identified. I don't think that anybody would disagree that it is very important to have an efficient administration, to have a better environment for expression and professional standards in the media area, to have a better electoral cycle, something on which we have insisted with each one of the elections since for the last 20 years practically, and to have a functional market economy, something that is the basis and the essence of the European project. You know, at the very beginning, people have tried to political messages and through defense associations to create this European Union, but actually the one model that has worked is the one through economic integration, linking people and businesses. That has been the recipe so far to have over 60 years of peace on our continent in the united European family. So the way and the spirit we are trying to promote in this exercise is that we have the ownership. We are doing it for our own citizens, and we are trying to make sure that through this process, because process matters as much as the goals, we make Macedonia a better place to live and do business. In that case, we make sure that we make progress, but we make sure also that our partners with whom we want to share a common roof feel more comfortable with it. I think that there are a set of areas in which we tend to neglect the importance of making the others feel comfortable with it, but this is one of them. The topics that we're discussing are those that should make you feel comfortable that you will have and you will enjoy equal chances whether you're on one or the other side of the border. And as a matter of fact, most of the time borders in this part of the world have been causes of troubles. And I think that by decreasing the importance of these borders, we will stimulate this peace project to be more sustainable and more viable. We also have another another story that is quite interlinked with the European Union project, and that is NATO. NATO logically has been the first box you need to check on your Excel sheet when you're heading to European integration. And I think that it has been a logical sequencing of things. On that side, already in 2008 during the Bucharest summit, it has been concluded that Macedonia has managed to fulfill all the criteria. We have shown maturity to grow from a security importer to a security exporter, and growing to be the 5th largest contributor in per capita terms in the ISAF Afghanistan mission, something that absorbs roughly 10% of our defense budget, and that has been recycling the efforts of practically half of our defense forces. If you put it in the context of the size of the country, then you will realize that it is quite a sacrifice that one needs to make. And we have continued to do that even during the 4 years since, according to the International Court of Justice, illegally Macedonia has been blocked to join the European Union, to join the NATO alliance. The observations that have been made after the Bucharest summit were a source of frustration not only to Macedonia and Macedonian citizens, but also to many member states and all those who wanted to see Europe more secure and more prosperous place. We made sure that the key value of what Europe stands for is respected, and that is the rule of law. I think that this is the essence of what the messages have been sent to practically all the countries that are part of the enlargement in the past period. And the rule of law means institutional response. Institutional response has been steered through the highest judicial instance of the United Nations, and it has resulted in a clear decision last December. However, it seems that international law is one thing, the rule of law is very important, but the force of a country to respect it or not respect it once it is in the club is something that one can put a question mark on. So for us, it is a matter of truth and facing reality, the fact that practically even after this very clear decision, Greece hasn't shown any signals of heading towards what would be an acceptable, mutually acceptable solution, something that will make everybody feel comfortable with, and something that will be respectful of democratic principles. I think that is the most important aspect of it. We are now at the stage where I think that the gravity of the debt crisis is obvious to all of us. It is something that might have been perceived at the first place of giving certain advantage or stimulating an environment that will bring us closer to a solution. My personal conviction is exactly the opposite, for several number of reasons. One is the economic reason. Our southern neighbor is one of our top 3 trade partners. We have so many business interlinks. So having a troubled neighbor is never a comforting fact for any country at all. The second one is the political aspect. And this is the fact that in practice, the seriousness of the crisis has affected political decision-making in Greece. And if there was very little motivation to move forward some years ago, now there's practically none. In a situation where we face second electoral cycle in weeks from now, after one very challenging situation that we have faced at the last elections, and with a very high level of unpredictability. We are facing an unpredictability on legal terms, which has been introduced by the violation of the agreement, and we are facing an unpredictability on the political ground, which is correlated to the seriousness of the debt crisis. Now, what one should do about it? I think that 2 elements are quite important, and one is, again, to remember where the source or the root of the problem is, the same way we have done it for the European story. I think that the main aspect of the bilateral difference that has emerged in the 90s, we shouldn't forget that it didn't exist before, in practice is the perceived threat that independent Macedonia might represent a threat to territorial integrity and security, something that has been promoted and campaigned on in the early 90s. And I think that this is something that can only be defined as a myth. In today's world, there is strictly no threat to security or territorial integrity to Greece, and especially not coming from Macedonia. The aspects that are more underlining is that many people, many businesses have interconnected interests, and that these interests have become even more important over time. And even in times of crisis, they're very important. We take the banking sector, a sector where you have a high exposure of Greek banks. In times where most of the banks there are challenged at the level of their existence, the same banks that own capital in Macedonia are making large profits. And I think that this is a good illustration of the fact that this integration process works. And it keeps in the focus what really matters: interlinking persons, interlinking businesses. The second one is a regional aspect. We should not lose out of the picture, out of our view, out of our analysis, the fact that we are part of a larger region. You know, I think that perhaps more in Southeast Europe than elsewhere, we have, or we tended to believe that the world ends at the horizon, and that the mountain that you see on the other side of the coin is the end of the world. It's quite the opposite. I think that in the past we have suffered quite a lot from that perception, and these days the world is very large, and we all depend on each other. Most of the countries in this region are rather small. They have opportunity to develop and progress only through integration and being part of a larger story. It is clear that it should be a merit-based system, and that each one will get whatever it invests and it will depend on the energy that is invested and on the efficiency of the system. But I think that by enlarging this story, we are creating more opportunities. It has been frustrating to conclude that in Brussels, most of the time when we talk about regional cooperation, people think about Scandinavia or Benelux. Very few people will think about Southeast Europe when you talk about regional cooperation if it's not about troublemaking issues. I think that this is a matter of our own responsibility. Number one, it is also a myth, and I think that if you scratch a little bit under the surface, there are so many common denominators and common interests for all the countries in the region that it can be compared by any standards to Scandinavia or to Benelux. One thing that maybe we should work on changing, and I think that we should look really from that perspective, is that depends pretty much on us, on ourselves. If we really invest most of our energy with the people that are in our wider region, then probably this perception will change over time. Perceptions change very slowly, they require a lot of energy, so I would understand if people get discouraged, but there has been a substantial progress. In the 90s, there was an inflation of regional cooperation initiatives. Practically most of ministers don't remember in which format are we meeting when we're talking about regional cooperation initiatives. The objective was just to bring people from different countries that have been opposed and basically in war some years before on the same table. I think that we are far beyond that level, and now we can talk about concrete projects. Now we can think about concrete items and topics that are linking, that are creating links between people and businesses. And we should take that ownership. We are really at the stage where we don't need someone from outside to come and tell us what we need to do in order to have an efficient regional cooperation, but quite the opposite. We can take the ownership, do it, and then promote it to the others. This change of perception, most of the time, depends really on us. I'm very glad that during the discussions that we're having today with my colleague at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also with the highest representatives of the Republic of Slovenia, we have come up to a conclusion that we have many areas in which we can further cooperate and in which this transfer of know-how, of experiences in the integration project can be beneficial to both sides. I've started by saying that the tourism bit is one of them. Seeing the sunset now, I think that it's about time to give you the opportunity to raise some questions, and I will appreciate and I will try and do my best to answer them, because I believe that this is the most important part of all the discussions that we can have, whether we talk about Macedonian European integration path or about regional cooperation. I would like to thank you.
Excellency, thank you for your very interesting presentation of the Macedonian perspectives. And as you already said, I have an honor to open the floor for questions. Yes, please. No questions?
I'm glad I've been so clear on Friday afternoon.
Okay, I will say merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Et là, il y a une personne qui voulait vous dire quelque chose. S'il vous plaît. Yes, please speak louder that we can hear. And stand up, please.
I'm Marko Cipollini from the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Slovenia. I have basically two questions. One is more provocative question, and it is deriving from the latest interview of the Prime Minister. You probably know who I'm referring to. And the question,
louder, please.
And the question which is coming out of this is do you believe that was it productive that you were meeting as a member of your delegation? Because as you may know, your Prime Minister said that he is not very convinced if the Foreign Ministry there should be there. That's a provocative question. And another question is, what is your plan to do after again, the denial that is deriving from the latest NATO summit? Because I cannot see any concrete plan what to do after that. Can you elaborate more about that?
Thank you. Okay. Was it enough clear?
Yes, well, I will definitely tackle them in order of as they were asked. I imagine that you made a reference to Prime Minister's interview when he said that perhaps the President and we shouldn't be represented at the presidential and ministerial level at the summit. I believe that we should make the assessments based on facts. And the fact is that the feeling of Macedonian people these days is that there is a little bit of don't do what I do, do what I tell you to do, in the concept of having a decision that is very clear on the judicial ground, that it is illegal to block Macedonia's way to joining NATO, and the possibility of a member state to block it and practically ignore the decision of the highest United Nations court. Why is the highest United Nations court important in this story? Is that we have made an agreement back in '95, the interim agreement, that has listed a very large list of concessions from Macedonian side, ranging from change of constitution, flag, providing guarantees that there is no territorial claim or anything like that. These items that have been rather humiliating, going to the extent of accepting a reference in use in the United Nations saying former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. I mean, I don't need to elaborate too much on how humiliating that seems. That is one of the aspects. The second aspect is that everything that has been said is really a reflection of what the citizens of Macedonia feel like. And I think that it is quite logical that the Prime Minister expresses the perception of the citizens of Macedonia. The bit on which you have, I imagine that you had in mind, was referring really to the level of importance that one gives or attributes to a certain meeting. And that the fact that we have been represented to the highest level in a meeting in which there is obviously no discussion about enlargement is a source of frustration and is something that is reflected. I believe that we should be honest with ourselves, and the best way to approach process of joining a club of partners and friends, because this is what the story is about, is to be very frank about what is the situation on the ground. On the other side of the story, there have been no illusions, and I can tell you very clearly that Macedonia is determined to continue on that road. I've said during my explanation, it is probably a bumpy road. It is a very difficult one. We do definitely have a feeling that we are bearing the heaviest mountain on the back. We might have a discussion on that, which mountain is the heaviest. But definitely, we are determined to go on that road. We have confirmed the capacity on continuing on that road. When I made reference to Margaret Thatcher, I really meant it has only made us stronger. We will not allow, by unlawful acts, to compromise the future of the people, because we strongly believe that Macedonia shares the same values and has the same interests as all the countries of the region. That is our perspective, and this is the spirit in which we would like to tackle it. The assessment on the ground needs to be realistic. We have to say that this is not only unjust, not only unprincipled, but also a clear violation of the highest judicial court, of the body that has been responsible for setting the interim agreement. In this interim agreement, there is one commitment. Greece said, we will not, if you accept the list of humiliating conditions that I have elaborated previously on, we will not block your prospects of joining international organizations. 2008, Bucharest Summit, there has been a clear violation of that bullet point. That is not something that is very principled. It is not something that would make a political decision maker feel very comfortable with it. But there is an instrument of pressure. For the future, I have told you what our vision is and where do we want to see our country going. Whether it is more or less steep road, whether we have extra, less weight on that road, we want to reach this objective. Probably what is the responsibility also of all the members of the same club is to promote some of the values that are essential to it. And I think that we should not allow for any radical approach to be promoted in it. You know, there are politicians in Greece that used to say that we should just make sure that Macedonia is outside the integration processes for long enough. That will create a kind of environment with a lot of uncertainty, and that will eventually lead to a crisis of a regional scale. And that crisis of a regional scale might be quite useful because it might make vanish some of these countries, so no country, no problem for us. Not very European, and I think it's counterproductive. We should work and we should invest our energy on the other side of the mountain, which is the one of promoting the same values and out of which we will all benefit. If Macedonia joins the NATO alliance tomorrow, Greece will only share borders with NATO member states. What can make you feel more comfortable than that? That is the logic. That's the bottom line.
Thank you. I would like to underline that I worked many years as the experts on UN Geographical Names Group, UNGEGAN, and we've been very much faced with the issue you mentioned. So, but I don't want to go further on in that discussion because it's too specialized probably. But also here in Slovenia being faced with similar problem, just to remind you, Piranski Zaliv, Savudrijska Vala, etc. But this is not the key point of your visit and your discussion here. But anyway, it's important issue, we understand.
Even if you tackle it on that level, I think that this has been more of a rule than an exception in European, also in global context. If this would have been the reason, then European Union and NATO should have never emerged, because Belgium has a region of Luxembourg as the name of a neighboring country, and they are both founding countries in both clubs. So if this was the logic to block someone, then probably we would have never managed to get the European project right.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Any other questions, please? Yes, please.
Ambassador Schumler from the Foreign Office. Monsieur le ministre, je vais me permettre de vous adresser en français, tout simplement parce que je viens d'apprendre que vous maîtrisez d'une manière excellente cette langue que nous partageons d'ailleurs. Et je vais me permettre ensuite de me résumer en anglais afin de me faire comprendre par tout le monde dans cette salle. La question sera extrêmement pragmatique. Comment évaluez-vous les relations de la République de Macédoine avec mon pays, c'est-à-dire avec la Slovénie? Où sont les points d'une future amélioration des relations excellentes déjà existantes, surtout peut-être sur le plan économique et des investissements dont votre pays a évidemment besoin. If I resume myself in English, I would say that I would ask the Minister how he views the relations of his country with the Republic of Slovenia, especially in view of our economic relations and of further possibilities of cooperation in the fields of direct foreign investment. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Je vous remercie beaucoup de cette question. Je vais m'adresser en anglais, comme ça nous permettra d'être plus compréhensible vis-à-vis l'audience. I will answer in English. I appreciate very much this question. I think it is extremely relevant in the current context. As I have said, I think that times of crisis are quite critical to show our capability to face it, but it is also a time when we have new opportunities. I think that Macedonia and Slovenia are definitely in such a phase. My strong conviction is that with the excellent level of political relations that we have between both of our countries, because of the links between people, businesses, the traditional presence of one and the other market, we have excellent opportunities to upgrade this economic cooperation. It is not sufficient just to state it, we should do something concrete on it. One of the instruments that we have agreed to work on is the coming Economic Council that we will organize in October this autumn. Something that is well overdue, as the last one took place 9 years ago. And I think that it is about time to concentrate the efforts on all the opportunities that are offered in front of us. I strongly believe that this October conference will be an excellent opportunity to examine some concrete points and see how we can stimulate that kind of environment. Hopefully, someone will have an opportunity to expose after this conference what are the concrete results, and it will respond better to the curiosity. What I think is essential is that in parallel with increasing the bilateral trade, which is well below the potential, we will definitely agree, we have to work on stimulating investments. I was very glad to hear that there are also some opportunities about Macedonian businessmen being interested to invest in some Slovene companies. It is much more obvious for Slovene companies that are present on the Macedonian market and are visible in some substantial areas such as the telecom or energy sector, for example, to make sure that there is a multiplication factor and that we increase the possibilities. I have also said that in economic, in a sector that has an economic dimension and is clearly linked to the environment, there is a high potential of exchange of views. We have concluded today in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that Slovenia was successful in building a brand about an ecological and green country. That is the first comment that I'm receiving from France when I'm discussing whether it is in France or Britain. When we talk about Slovenia, that is the first image. Wow, so green, clean, beautiful country. And I think that these are some of the items on which there is a clear investment potential from Slovenian companies. There is also the potential for exchange of know-how. The management of thermal water and thermal resources in Slovenia is at the highest level. I still remember my first experiences at Terme close to Maribor when I was a kid. and these were quite good examples about what we can do in Macedonia. I believe that there are already some investors in this area that are interested in prospects of developing this sector. And perhaps with some of the aspects of rural tourism, we can also increase the exchange of tourists. I know that Slovenia is very successful in that. I hope that we will be able to, I know that it's not possible to copy-paste the solution, but at least to get some inspiration. That will be quite helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Dean and to encourage students to having an excellent opportunity to do something and to ask certain questions, new, young ideas, etc. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I really enjoyed your talk. It was great. I'm really tempted. It's my academic week point to pose questions, as you would probably imagine. But I won't abuse my floor here and rather really invite my students, those who come here, to pose a question or two. I think this is a great opportunity. We rarely have a minister among us, so please.
And you rarely have a minister that has been a student only some 10-15 years ago. Use the opportunity.
1 point for you. Yes, please do. This is typical for Slovenia, that students are relatively shy. In the United States, it's a completely different situation.
But usually not in my classes, so I'm wondering what's going on.
Must be me then.
So is there a question? Otherwise I will abuse the floor and I will put otherwise.
Maybe I'm too brave. Yes, please.
Friday afternoon with such beautiful weather, students are already outside.
Good afternoon. My name is Jan Angelina from Ljubljana. If you manage to join the EU in near foreseeable future, will you then make an effort to enter also Eurozone? Or in other words, if I put it differently, as a neighbor of Greece, what is your opinion on Euro? or also, if I put it differently, how much can Macedonia comply to Maastricht criteria? Which criteria you are the strongest and which weakest, if you can elaborate a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this extremely relevant question. I think that it is the right moment to address these issues. We are very lucky, I would say, to be a country that has fulfilled the Maastricht criteria for over a decade. Our overall debt level is 26% of the GDP. We have a deficit that has never exceeded 2%. We have an inflation that is always within what can be said according to the definition of Maastricht criteria. And it has been a matter of most important priority of government policies. We have enjoyed macroeconomic stability for 10 to 15 years. It has been at a rather high price at certain levels because we couldn't have, and we were never challenged to stimulate growth through a high level of inflation. Probably the past has taught us something because we have experienced hyperinflation. We have experienced a runoff in one of the major savings banks in the 90s. The conclusion that has derived out of it was that macroeconomic policy and macroeconomic discipline is a matter of principle. So from that perspective, Macedonia technically would be able to join the Eurozone as we speak. The other thing is that in the level of integration with the European Union, you are quite aware that there are already 2 countries in our region that have adopted unilaterally the euro as their own currency. At the level of integration that we experience and we enjoy with the European Union, such a gesture cannot be concluded in such a manner. We are a long-standing candidate country. Many people say that we are such a good candidate that they don't want to lose us as a candidate. and in that kind of situation, we will have to get some sort of agreement going there. However, the dinar has been pegged for over 10 years with the then Deutschmark and the now euro. And from that perspective, being an extremely open economy, you know, our exports plus imports are even higher than our GDP. So we are talking about an economy that is extremely open at the level of Belgium or Netherlands, let's say, in the European Union. And that makes really sense. We are 2 million people, like Slovenia. And it really makes sense that we integrate sooner rather than later within the economic area and de facto into the Eurozone. From that perspective, we wouldn't have any difficulties to fulfill the criteria. As I said, it is a matter of political willingness. If we would have been able to advance in a logical manner and complete the negotiating chapters, that one would have been a rather easy file to close and to advance on the other ones. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course.
Nevertheless, I decided to abuse my position of a co-chair as it was a question. So I was wondering, you depicted really well the bumpy road of Macedonia in the European Union, towards the European Union, but we must admit nowadays also the European Union itself is on a bumpy road. And we will also need to admit, and I really like your metaphor, pedaling metaphor. We are all pedaling, but do we still know the direction we are pedaling to? So I was wondering about your personal view of the future of the European Union in 10, 20 years. Now maybe from the external Macedonian perspective, because I think the insiders might have lost the sense of the right direction. Very academic question, so you could think of it.
Well, I appreciate that one. It's not an easy one. As I said, our road has been uphill without pedals. In your metaphor, you would suggest that European road is downhill, but with no brakes. Risky business in both directions. However, I hope not. I'm convinced that this is not the case. Otherwise, I think it will be quite irresponsible to push your own country into a club that is going straight out of the hills. And so, as I said at the very beginning, referring to the integration process, there have been ups and downs. We should not ignore that. I mean, we can have a discussion how serious is now, how serious was then. Probably very few people knew it. At that time there were wars and conflicts in the world. They are still now. So it is legitimate to ask the question, have we really solved everything and do we know where we are heading? However, I haven't heard a sensible suggestion that is a better alternative to the model of European economic integration that has been proposed. And it has been the only model that has been tested as successful. Let me remind you once again, over 60 years, there is peace, stability and prosperity for the countries that belong to the club called European Communities or European Union. You can put the label you would like to. That's a fact. If you would be able to name another example elsewhere in the world, then maybe we can discuss about alternatives. For the time being, this is the best possible alternative for present in front of us. The other side, which is more important, the vision, where we are heading, how we will face future challenges. I do agree that it is a bumpy road. No one said it will be an easy one. I think that these were the messages of the founding fathers. If you look at Schuman and Monet, they had no illusions that this will be an easy file, they will close it and go to retirement to enjoy the countryside. That wasn't the case. They knew that there will be challenges for the generations after that. We, as a candidate country, I think have a certain advantage compared to the current member states in that respect. It might sound paradoxical, but it is a matter of fact. And that is that once you're in the club and you enjoy these benefits, you tend to forget how it looks like when you're outside and when you don't have that. It is a perfectly human characteristic. It is probably the most human of all characteristics. You never appreciate what you have. This is what my wife tells me when I say that she hasn't cooked a good dinner or I'm complaining about this and that. Says you should appreciate. You were at university and you didn't have these advantages. I'm kidding about it, but this is really the essence of the story. When you're in the club, you tend to believe that, well, you know, life is perfect, whether you're in or not. Everything will be settled, and that's not the case. And sometimes it takes a step backwards and look what it looked like before, what is it looking like now, and where are you heading in the future. You have mentioned the Eurozone and the risks, and we face this reality that we have a southern neighbor that is practically at the edge of going out of the Eurozone. But I think that that will be quite an awakening exercise once you step out there, and then you realize that there is a rough world out there. It is practically a jungle. And you better make sure that you contribute in the club that you're in, and that you act in a responsible manner. Not just feel that everything is settled and is granted and you don't need to invest any energy. I think if sometimes theoretically we can make a step backwards and observe the future, I would see quite good opportunities. One thing we should not forget is what is our main objective, and the second one, that the world is a rather large place these days. You know, if we tend to believe that Europe is a leading place, the richest place on earth, and that we should enjoy prosperity for eternity without investing a lot of labor, I think it's kind of contradicting. If you ask people in Asia, they will tell you what is happening right now is coming back to normal. Actually, for centuries and centuries and centuries, India and China were something like 70% of world GDP. Very few people realize that. So they say, well, we're coming back to what is a normal stage. So this enjoyable period is a rather exceptional thing. So you better make sure that you extend it, and this is through labor. There have been a lot of studies, and when I say about making a step back, I do not claim that I'm the person that has invented that. Obviously, the European Union is doing that on a daily basis. How successful this exercise of stepping back is, probably time will on the show. But the strategy 2010, the European strategy about making Europe the most competitive knowledge-based economy in the world, has made some assessments. Some of these assessments suggested that in Europe we favor leisure to labor. You know, they were making these studies and come up with the conclusion that, for example, America American productivity and European one. The European productivity on average is at the level of 70% of the American. So maybe we do enjoy a little bit more over our possibilities. Maybe we should make sure that we keep the balance clean, because you can enjoy for a certain period of time on the back of the wealth that we have accumulated, but it is a matter of basic economics that it cannot be forever. First thing they will tell you, and you don't need to go to Chicago and read Milton Friedman's book about economics, is that there is no such a thing as a free lunch. If you don't pay for it, there is certainly someone else paying for that. So you better make sure that this is not a perpetual exercise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our time is off, and I am somehow forced to close this meeting. Your Excellency, your speech was very, very exciting, and I am sure that we enjoyed it all. Thank you very much.
A good preparation for the weekend, I hope.